Well, the time is just gone 15 minutes to 5 as we continue with the broadcast this afternoon. And it is Iftar Drive with myself, Inayat Wadi. Now, on a global level, the relationship between Egypt and Turkey has now come under the radar, under the spotlight. And a few years ago, we wouldn't have imagined because these are two countries that faced each other on multiple fronts. They attack each other in speeches. And fast forwarding to today, we see that they have started holding talks at ministerial level. Now, to understand this relationship between Egypt and Turkey, we are going across now to be joined by uh, Professor Nidal Sakr, who is joining us out of the United States of America this afternoon. Professor Nidal, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. As always, we appreciate your time, and I know you are traveling, but Ramadan Kareem to you, and wonderful you're able to join us.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It's always a pleasure to be with you, brother. Ramadan Kareem to you as well.
Yes, I know you are traveling, so we wish you a safe journey, inshallah. But Professor Nidal, let's just talk about this relationship between Egypt and Turkey. A few years ago, we know that this relationship was very, very cold. They were attacking each other, and now we're starting to see some sort of a relationship evolving or developing once again between these two countries.
When we talk about Turkey and Egypt in the current context, we are talking about a major regional superpower that's well on its way to become continental superpower and a global superpower that has been on a strategy for over 20 years right now to take its prominent place in world politics and regional politics. And we're talking about Egypt, which is a major central country in the Middle East, in North Africa, and in the region, but on the decline of its global standing, its regional standing, its economic influence or leverage, its diplomatic leverage, and so forth. So we're talking about like really two powers that are in opposite directions in terms of naturally, every country has its own internal considerations and has its external considerations. The primary consideration that we see for Turkey right now as they manage regaining their position in the global scene, whether economically, politically, or diplomatically, right? Turkey is faced by a number of challenges on the internal level. The most important one is the upcoming elections in May, where basically you have agenda by the ruling party, by President Erdogan and his party, which is set on regaining that global standing for Turkey and prominence. Of course, they are faced by some seculars who are completely opposite ideology, who basically are set on taking Turkey back to quote-unquote dark ages, where country was subject to one coup after another by a military that's currently weakened under Erdogan. And when I say weakened, it's not weakened in terms of its strength and preparation. It's weakened in terms of its leverage over the country's politics, like before. Before, the military was in control of who's in charge, who's in power. And as we saw with Prime Minister, the late Prime Minister Najmuddin Erbakan, they overthrew a number of governments and they actually executed one of the country's presidents and prime ministers before. So they did have a great control over the country. They were answering to the US at the time and other external powers, and at the expense of the prominence of Turkey. And they really took Turkey backwards like for decades. Well, Erdogan has basically reformed the system and changed that whole thing, especially like after the coup of 2016, where he put the military in its right place and got the military out of politics and put the military in its right place of defending the country and establishing or solidifying Turkey's military might in the region to combat its challenges. So Turkey has its own considerations, and they're well on their way to achieve their strategy, whether it's long-term, medium term, or even long-term. But as I said, that the first obstacle that they have to deal with right now, the challenge, is the elections. As we know, Turkey is a country that's important to everybody in the world, and we see that internal Turkish politics is heavily influenced by many countries who are trying to get in and trying to play, those competing parties against one another. We know Israel is a major player. We know the US is a major player. We know the Gulf countries are a major player, and we know that everybody wants to play on the Turkish politics, and very much everybody wants really to weaken the ruling party, Erdogan, standing and have him out of power. So Erdogan understands all that. The Turkish strategy in that case is zero conflict. Try to neutralize all those quote-unquote adversaries and to go past election and continue the strategy or the track that they're on. Egypt, whether we like it or not, is a regional country. They have their own leverage in terms of Africa, in terms of Middle East, in terms of some other countries. We know the issue of the Muslim Brotherhood is always going to be a major issue. It's not going to go away. So they have to play that like very carefully and skillfully, and at least quote unquote neutralizing Egypt. Egypt right now is like a begging country basically that's living on the charity donations and giveaways by Gulf countries and so forth, and the International Monetary Fund. Egypt is by no means a country that's sustainable the way it is right now, at least as far as the government, the political regime. And of course, like they want any recognition or any legitimization or validation by anybody. So for them to be approached by Turkey, that's like a gift from heaven. We know that there was an attempt by Sheikh Tamim of Qatar during the World Cup to bring Sisi and Erdogan to shake hands, and they did. And from that point on, following Turkey's strategy of neutralizing threats and external influences on its elections, Turkey has a great interest in neutralizing Egypt in that regard. Turkey has made concessions in that regard by basically taking away some of the freedoms of the opposition, Egyptian opposition that was basically based out of Turkey, or at least living in Turkey or exiled to Turkey. Many of them have been removed or have moved out actually, or pressured to leave. Some of the TV stations, channels, news and media outlets have been shut down. So Turkey has really made like a great concessions in terms of making gestures towards the Egyptian government or the coup regime in Egypt to neutralize that conflict and move forward with the relationship. Turkey by no means would take the Egyptians or the Egyptian people as enemies. Turkey has great resources and brilliant investors that can solve many of the Egyptian problems in terms of the needs of the population and the consumer goods and this kind of thing. So both parties, they do have actually great interest in having that cooperation between the two of them. And we can look at any moves between the two countries, which are mostly initiated by Turkey, by the way. Like Turkey is the one that has been really taking steps, while Egypt has been on the receiving end. And quite often, Egypt has not really been keeping its end of the deal, just like they did with the Gulf countries, just like they did with everything. Egypt lacks any structural or institutional framework running the country anyway, including their foreign relations. Turkey, they know who they're dealing with, basically. A regime that's basically like living day by day kind of thing. And, we shouldn't look at it any more than that. You're talking about countries in conflict. Actually, the countries are never in conflict. It's just a self-destructive coup regime that has really ran Egypt aground, has failed to meet the needs of its population, and is taking the country into decline. Egypt is very much bankrupt country right now, economically, militarily, and otherwise. Egypt is running on its like a traditional historical leverage and role and weight, but currently Egypt is really a failed state. So we should not see it anything more than that.
Yes, Professor Nidal, just looking, and you mentioned the Ikhwan, you mentioned the Muslim Brotherhood. Now, where does this actually, with this relationship that is now starting to again surface between Turkey and Egypt? We know the Turkish position as far as the Muslim Brotherhood is concerned. They were highly critical at the time of the coup as well, when Mohammed Morsi was removed. And looking at Turkey and the way they view the Muslim Brotherhood versus Egypt. Now, where does this leave an organization like the Muslim Brotherhood when we find this relationship between Turkey and Egypt starting to get even more closer than it's ever been?
Okay, I mean, Muslim Brotherhood, when we talk about Muslim Brotherhood, it's not really an organization, it's a school of thought. It's basically a school of thought and sets of values and way of life that actually provide a contemporary formula to how we live our faith, how Muslims live their faith in the light of the current realities. That's really what Muslim Brotherhood is all about. To exaggerate Muslim Brotherhood as a threat. We know that Arab regimes and the U.S. at some time, when they had this war on terror and creating or painting Islam as the enemy, supposedly to Western civilization. So many people try to play the so-called political Islam. And they actually labeled the Muslim Brotherhood as the front to that political Islam. And somehow they always mixed things like jihadists or some resistance or some movements and some of the, let's say, terrorist organizations like ISIS, for example, and so forth, which was created by Western intelligence plus Arab regimes, plus like whoever is against the Arab Spring. But nonetheless, so, you had like all kinds of like fringe groups here and there and so forth who were committing atrocious acts and that are anything but Islam. Actually, they go against the fundamentals of Islam. And somehow they threw Muslim Brotherhood as like one of those or whatever it is. So nonetheless, the reality that we have today, especially like thanks to Trump's presidency, where the US and the West have started to pay attention to white supremacy and the right-wing politics and the Christian fundamentalists and even the Zionist agenda as really the real threat to civilization. Now we see the largest threat in the US is actually no longer, they're not talking about Islam anymore. They're talking about white supremacy and right-wing groups. And which is the real threat that's facing is detrimental even to the existence of the US, its unity, its integrity, and its existence as superpower. The same thing that's faced actually throughout Europe, actually, they're facing their own version of that as well. So now Islam at large is not seen by the world as quote unquote threat or terrorism or a threat to civilization and so forth. Muslim Brotherhood as being the group it is with its overall comprehensive agenda, social, political, educational, and so forth, is no longer seen by anybody in the world very much as a threat except by the Arab and Middle Eastern dictatorships, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, UAE, and all of these failing states. So, of course, Muslim Brotherhood, in terms of numbers, like people, exiled people of Muslim Brotherhood, Turkey still houses like many of them. But since all of this political maneuvers between Egypt and Turkey, many of those, at least on the leadership level, have left Turkey. The ones in Turkey who are still in Turkey of the Muslim Brotherhood, or at least the ones who claim some sort of leadership status or role, they're really in a state of disarray, especially after the passing of Ibrahim Munir, the acting general, Secretary General of the Muslim Brotherhood out of London. So there is some sort of reshuffling and reorganizing. Most of the people who are in Turkey and in other places of the Muslim Brotherhood, they really have not been seasoned in terms of leadership role. They really haven't had the chance to assume pivotal and important organizational roles within the organization and so forth. So you would expect that, there is some sort of lack of organization, lack of unity, lack of uniform speech, and so forth. Which is expected. Muslim Brotherhood is not going away. Muslim Brotherhood is coming back even much stronger, by the way, because as we see that all the trials and tribunals that the Muslim Brotherhood has gone under, it came out much more effective, much more stronger, and much more adaptable to current realities. We have to say that, yes, I believe that the Muslim Brotherhood was ready to take over from the dictatorships at the time of the Arab Spring. Things have changed a lot ever since. Those dictators, they've really established like more iron grip, like much more stricter iron grip over their populations. Countries are faced with different challenges right now, economic and otherwise. The US has its own turmoil to deal with, which is mostly internal, and let's say things that have to do with foreign intervention in their elections and this kind of thing. So everyone, like, they got their own problems to deal with. Nobody wants headache. Muslim Brotherhood is really not providing any help in terms of those who host them on the leadership level. So I don't think that the Muslim Brotherhood is being high on the agenda, Turkish agenda, in terms of putting their neck out to try to, let's say, protect, serve, and so forth. Nonetheless, from all I know, Turkey has not been retaliatory against any Muslim Brotherhood leadership. They have not really taken any, at least official action, trying to get rid of them or force them or pressure them out of the country and so forth. My understanding and what I've seen, I just came back from Turkey recently, that as long as you keep to yourself, as long as you don't try to create any embarrassment or any tension for the Turkish government at this time, you can live freely and so forth. So I believe, like most of the Muslim Brotherhood right now who live in Turkey, they're very much politically mute. And they just want to live in peace with their families, whoever of them is over there. And, a time is going to come when the Muslim Brotherhood is going to be actually the one to go back to in terms of population, in terms of political alternative to the current dictatorship and so forth. So Muslim Brotherhood is not going anywhere. Muslim Brotherhood, by the way, is first and foremost grounded in its own societies. Like it's still doing very well in Egypt, suppressed, yes, but the school of thought, the allegiance, the sense of belonging to it and so forth is still very, very popular among the Egyptian population. They've seen what life under quote-unquote Muslim Brotherhood was compared to what it is under Sisi. They still remember like the Muslim Brotherhood hospitals, schools, charities, orphanages that were offering free service to the population before, like during the time of Mubarak and before the coup. So everybody still remembers like those glorious days of the Muslim Brotherhood as being very active as social network, providing basic services and needs to the people. They will come back. They will come back very strong. They will come back very solid. People are still talking about the success of Morsi regime in solving many problems, Minister Bas Maouda and others. People, I think, like in Egypt now, they're much more appreciative to the Muslim Brotherhood experience in office when Morsi was in power. Definitely the parliament members of the Muslim Brotherhood and how they stood forcefully to the interests of the public are still remembered right now and compared to the
Yes, we seem to
going
have.
anywhere. Yeah, Muslim Brotherhood are not going anywhere. They're doing well. And the time is going to come, inshallah, when they become less of quote-unquote liability to the countries that are hosting them. And inshallah, in the near future, they'll be going back to their home countries to be among their own people and continue addressing the needs and aspirations of their population, or the population of their own countries.
Well, inshallah, Professor Nidal, Jazakallah. I know you are traveling. You've got quite a long journey ahead of you, inshallah. Allah grant you safety on your trip, and we continue making dua for you and wishing you well for the rest of the month of Ramadan. And we remember the Muslim Ummah in this beautiful and glorious month of Ramadan. As always, Jazakallah for your time. We do appreciate you taking time out and talking to us right here on Salam Media. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It's always a pleasure to be with you, and Ramadan Mubarak. Inshallah, happy Eid afterwards to you and to all your audience and listeners, inshallah, and our people in South Africa.
Professor Nidal Sakr, March for Justice, with us this afternoon, and quite an interesting dynamic that he's playing out with regard to the relationship that he's building between Turkey and Egypt and what some of the underlying issues are. Very well articulated, and that was Professor Nidal Sakr. We're going to go for a break. We'll come back. We've got Mohammed Gibran standing by. We've got of that tragedy, the bus crash in Saudi Arabia. 20 people that were en route to perform their Umrah had been killed, another 29 that were injured when the bus crashed in Saudi Arabia. We'll find out what that is all about from Mohammed Gibran Khan.